And then the wise king sat his royal rump down on the bling throne, and all was right with the world. But why is it always a king? Or maybe an empire if the writer's feeling expansionist? I bet you've seen a zillion of these aristocracy governments in science fiction and fantasy, and alternative history, and basically anything speculative ever written. But what if we change that? What are your options for a fantasy government? That's what I want to explore today in the first video of my series on political fantasy. I'm going to tackle this by means of the iceberg meme, starting above the water with all the ones we know and love, the ones we take from our world. Then we'll go progressively deeper into more and more speculative arenas until we reach the dark, unlit depths of governments. Welcome to the first episode in the series on political fantasy from Just in Time Worlds with your host, Marie Mullaney. Okay, let's dive straight into it with the governments at the tip of the iceberg. 1. Republic. A republic is a form of government where the country is considered a public matter, from the Latin res publica, and the head of state is an elected or nominated president, not a monarch. A real-world example is the United States of America. A fantasy example is the Galactic Republic in Star Wars before its transformation into the Empire. Good political plots for this kind of government include stories about intrigue, corruption and reform in the Senate, election campaigns with high stakes, or a quest to uncover and stop a conspiracy threatening the Republic's stability. 2. Aristocracies. This is the one we all know and love. Noble governments with a monarch of some kind at the top and a noble ruling class. I've made a hella comprehensive video about this kind of government. Check it out in the information card. Sometimes this kind of government is combined with a constitution to form a constitutional monarchy. Real-world examples include our neighbors to the west, Sweden, Norway and Denmark, both with and without a constitution, depending on where in history you look. Fantasy examples are myriad, but Game of Thrones leaps to mind, especially if you take the TV series as canon, which I hope we can all agree is a terrible thought, but here we are. And they veer towards an elected monarch after the events of the horrifying last season. Great plots for this kind of government include power struggles between the monarchy and the emerging parliamentarian system if you go the constitutional route. A monarch's efforts to modernize the kingdom while facing resistance. A royal family's secret magical heritage that legitimizes their rule. Or, of course, our old favorites, rebellion and revolt. Check out the information card for my videos on those two topics. 3. Federalism. This is a system of government where power is divided between a central national government and several regional governments. Real-world examples include our neighbor to the south, Germany. Germany is divided into Länder, states, that have their own governments. A fantasy example is the United Federation of Planets in Star Trek, which governs a vast range of planets and species, each with its own autonomy, but united under a single federal government. Plot ideas for this kind of government include diplomatic missions to resolve conflicts between states, a secession crisis, or stories of unity and shared purpose across diverse worlds. 4. Empire. An empire represents a political construct in which one state dominates over others, ruled by a single authority, often an emperor or empress. It is known for its extensive territories, encompassing diverse cultures and peoples, unified under one government. You see why I put it right after federalism, right? Anyway, a real-world example is the Persian Empire, particularly under the Achaemenid dynasty, which was known for its innovative administration system, respect for the cultures in its constituent peoples, and the royal road for facilitating communication and commerce across its vast territories. A great fantasy example of empire is the Malazan Empire in Stephen Erickson's Malazan Book of the Fallen series. This empire consists of military prowess, magic, and the involvement of deities in its governance, portraying the complexity and challenges of running an expansive and diverse empire. Stories for empire could include the challenges of integrating diverse cultures under one crown, the moral and ethical dilemmas of imperial expansion, intrigue and power struggles within the imperial court, or a narrative focusing on the life of a provincial governor navigating the empire's demands while catering to local needs. 5. Direct democracy. In a direct democracy, citizens have a direct role in decision-making process. They vote on laws and policies themselves rather than through representatives. This was implemented in the real world in ancient Athens, where citizens would gather to vote directly on legislation and executive bills. It's a rare thing in science fiction or fantasy, but you could implement it either in a small, closely knit community who decide their affairs through consensus, or you could use magic or technology to enable large-scale voting for whole nation-states. Plot ideas for this kind of government include a community struggle to maintain its direct democracy in the face of an external threat, the process of a significant decision such as a peace treaty with neighboring realms, the challenges of implementing direct democracy in a larger society, or, rather topical in this day and age, the battle with misinformation as citizens attempt to understand what they're voting for. And for our final tip of the iceberg, 6. Oligarchy. In an oligarchy, power is held by a small group of people, distinguished by factors such as nobility, wealth, education, corporate, religious, or military control. For a real-world example, let's go further south than Germany, and somewhat back in time, to the Venetian Republic during the Renaissance period. It was governed by a small, wealthy elite who were members of the Great Council, composed of noble families. The council elected the Doge and controlled the Republic's affairs, effectively making Venice an oligarchic state. A notable science fantasy example is Dune by Frank Herbert, which features a feudal oligarchy with noble houses controlling entire planets and the Padishah emperor overseeing them all. Stories could focus on the dynamics within the ruling elite, including power struggles, alliances, and betrayals, a commoner's rise to power within the oligarchic society, or efforts of a group of revolutionaries aiming to break the oligarchy's grip on power. What do you think? What other governments would you add to the tip of the iceberg? Let me know in the comments. And let's move one layer down to below the waterline. These are governments that are well known, but they are interesting nonetheless. So, 1. Theocracy. This is a government by religious leaders or where the state's legal system is based on religious law. For a real-world example, consider Iran, where the supreme leader holds significant religious and political power. For a fantasy example, look no further than the Covenant in the Halo video game series. This is a theocratic military alliance of alien races. Theocracies make for a number of good storylines, and I did make a video on them, which you can check out in the information card. 2. Technocracy. In this system, decision-making is in the hands of technical experts, especially those skilled in science and technology, prioritizing efficiency and expertise over traditional political leadership. Singapore is often cited for its focus on this kind of meritocracy and its efficiency of governance, led by highly qualified professionals in their respective fields. I don't know how true that is. Maybe someone from Singapore can comment down below, but that's certainly the impression you get in Europe. Another interesting example is Italy. Not that Italy is a technocracy, but sometimes the parliament will appoint a technocrat as prime minister as a compromise candidate when the parties in the parliament can't compromise enough to elect one of their own as a prime minister. This kind of government is uncommon in fantasy governments, but it can be seen quite often in guilds, where leadership of the guild is placed in the hands of the masters of the craft. Good plot ideas for this kind of government include a breakthrough discovery that threatens to disrupt the social order, a conflict between different schools of thoughts within the technocracy, the challenge of balancing unbridled innovation with ethical considerations. 3. Plutocracy. Yes, lots of things that end with crassy. In a plutocracy, wealth directly translates to political power, with a governing class often consisting of the wealthiest individuals or entities who use their economic influence to shape policy and governance to their advantage. Carthage stands as a historical instance of a plutocracy, where the city's governance and political influence were heavily determined by merchant wealth and commercial success in trade. The wealthiest citizens had significant sway in the decision-making process and the city's direction. For fantasy, let's turn to one of my favorite role-playing settings, the mega corporations in the Shadowrun universe. For me, they epitomize a plutocracy. These corporations operate beyond national laws through extraterritorially, effectively governing large regions and populations. They possess their own armies, create their own laws, and directly influence global politics to protect and expand their interests. In Shadowrun, wealth and corporate power are synonymous with governance, and the governments exist only to rubber stamp the corp's decisions. There are some great plot ideas that arise from this kind of setting. Stories could delve into the shadowy interplay between corporate espionage and political maneuverings. A grassroots movement could reclaim power from the corporations. Or you could lean into the personal dilemmas of characters who find themselves caught between corporate loyalty and the greater good. 4. Autocracy. This one is pretty simple. Rule by a single individual with absolute power, often without meaningful checks or balances. Usually for some reason, like they have all the military power in a military dictatorship, or they were born into the role and hence have all the military power, like an absolute monarch, or some other reasonably forceful reason. Real-world examples include Tsarist Russia before the 1917 revolution, ruled by the Tsar with an absolute authority, or North Korea, ruled by Kim Jong-un, with pervasive control over the state and society. For fantasy or sci-fi, look no further than almost every evil empire ever. These kinds of governments absolutely beg for rebellion or revolution storylines. Or you could do a succession struggle. The old emperor dies, and who will succeed him? His scheming son? His devious daughter? Or the unseen uncle none of them saw coming? And from strict hierarchical government, let's swing to the other extreme for 5. Libertarianism. This is a political philosophy that emphasizes individual freedom and minimal government intervention. No country fully follows this, but the USA certainly has plenty of libertarian ideals. Libertarian states have a lot of interesting plots you can run with. There are the challenges to maintaining order and freedom in a libertarian society, the conflict between individual rights and collective needs, and of course, what happens if the state is threatened from the outside? How does it defend itself without compromising its libertarian values? And for our last above-the-waterline government, let's talk about a confederation, or an interstate compact. This is a union of sovereign states united for purposes of common action, often through a treaty with a focus on retaining state sovereignty over a central government. A real-world example of this is where I live. The European Union, or EU, is a unique political and economic union between European countries that is ruled by a treaty we all signed. We are still sovereign nations, but we take many joint decisions through the pseudo organs of state governed by the Lisbon Treaty. For a science fiction example, the Outer Planets Alliance of the Expanse strikes me as this kind of government. They work together for mutual goals, but they are still sovereign states. There is a wealth of plot lines here, negotiations and diplomacy between member states, the tension between unity and sovereignty, crises that test the strength of the alliance, like threatening neighbors on your eastern border. And if you've enjoyed this speed run through government so far, hit that thumbs up button and let's dip our heads under the waterline. Before we get there though, man, my throat is dry. Cheers. Yeah, back to the video. For this section, we're diving into government types that are less commonly featured in mainstream discourses, but still offer rich soil for speculative and imaginative exploration. But they're not yet fully leaning into fantasy. These kinds of governments can still exist in our world, at least partially. Okay, number 1, meritocracy. This is a system where power and positions of authority are awarded based on individual merit, skill, and achievement rather than through wealth, birthright, or election. In our world, there has never been a pure meritocracy, to the best of my knowledge. But ancient China implemented a meritocratic system through its imperial examination system, which determined positions in the government bureaucracy. I actually used that example in my first video on government types, which takes you through the basics of creating a government in fantasy based on what powers your government, and you can check that out in the information card. In terms of a speculative fiction example, the Vulcan Society in Star Trek exemplifies meritocracy, with positions and status achieved through demonstrating logic, knowledge, and ethical behavior. Easy plot lines here include a story of a young prodigy navigating the challenges of a meritocratic society, internal conflicts arising from the pressure of and competition in a meritocratic system, the discovery of corruption that undermines the society's meritocratic ideals. 2. Demarchy. I love this conceptually as a government. This is also known as sortition, and it is the selection of government randomly, although hopefully from a pool of qualified candidates. So there's no election or appointment, they roll the dice on who gets the role. Ancient Athens used sortition to select most of their officials, ensuring that power could be held by any citizen and not just by the wealthy or well-connected. I haven't seen this done in full in any fantasy world, but I lean into part of this in my science fantasy series Skies of Destiny, which you can check out on the links below. In this series, people are selected at random, given their skill set, for tasks the floating city of Shadow needs done. And in Book 1, Magic Fall, one of our protagonists is thus selected for a dangerous planet-side mission. And with that, the plot is off to the races. And that's one of the great plot lines of this kind of government, the surprise selection of an unassuming citizen to a high-powered position, and their adaptation to that role. Another plot line is a conspiracy to manipulate the lottery system, or the story of the society transitioning to a demarchy to escape the pitfalls of a previous government. All of these can make great storylines. 3. Gerontocracy. This is a form of government where the elder members of the society have the most power and authority, often justified by associating age with wisdom and experience. For a real-world example, let's look to the US Senate. Just kidding, guys. I tease because I love you. While this kind of government is not common as a formal government system, aspects of a gerontocracy has often been seen in tribal councils of elders or the old wise hermit trope. An interesting fantasy example is the Deathless Elves in the Eberron Dungeons & Dragons setting, specifically the Undying Court of Aeronel. These elves are sustained by positive energy, allowing them to live beyond natural lifespans and govern with centuries of wisdom and experience. This immortal ruling class provides a unique twist on the concept of gerontocracy, blending reverence for age with a fantastical element of undeath. Interesting plot lines in this form of government is, of course, in that generational tension, where the youth of the nation resist the guidance of the elders, or perhaps something could happen and the physicality of the youth is required, but they are denied a voice in the decision-making, causing political stress and tension. 4. Here's an odd one. Let me know in the comments if you've heard of this before. Anocracy. This is where governance is based on intelligence, wisdom, and problem-solving abilities, often associated with philosophical ideas of enlightened leadership. This was theoretically proposed by philosophers like Plato in the Rule of the Philosopher Kings, but a anocracy has never been fully implemented, probably because how on earth do you identify these wonderfully wise people? I mean, yeah. Solve that problem and you probably get to go to Stockholm for a Nobel Prize. In fantasy, however, this could be a very interesting form of government if you combined it with some kind of test, like the King Arthur drawing the sword from the stone test. So, before the wise king rules, he must pass the test of 92 minds and open the portal to the dark, swirling whirlpool of nothingness. Or pass the test of the Gom Jabbar, whichever comes first, and be a great emperor on a golden path. Interesting plot lines include the journey of a society striving to achieve anocracy, conflict between emotional and rational governance, a threat that tests the limits of rational decision-making, like, does it make sense to kill 49% of the population to serve 51%? Or can you be cruel enough to make humanity somehow be kind? I swear, sometimes the Dune storyline drives me nuts. And last of our governments before we hit the dark depths below, anarchy. Anarchy is not just everyone acting like a jerk or beating each other up or whatever. It is a state of society without government or authority, where individuals govern themselves, often idealized as a state of complete freedom and equality. I will do a full video on this because the philosophy is interesting and can spark a lot of world-building ideas. But in brief, there has been no anarchy state on our world, but there have been anarchist communities in various times and places, like the Free Territory during the Ukraine Revolution or the anarchist Catalonia during the Spanish Civil Wars. Although these were more instances of anarchism as political movement rather than as stable forms of governance. For science fiction, we turn to Ursula Le Guin again. Odenism from The Dispossessed embodies the principles of anarchy, depicting a society that strives to live according to the ideals of mutual aid, freedom, and equality, without a centralized government. The Odonians' way of life is an experiment in anarchist living, highlighting both the challenges and the potential of such a society. Interesting plots here include the tensions between anarchist society and neighboring states with hierarchical governments, internal debates within the society about the balance between an individual's freedom and collective responsibility, and what happens when the high bond of trust required for anarchy states comes under strain. How many of these government types did you know about? Let me know in the comments down below, and let's go even deeper to the types of government you can only find in fantasy or science fiction. For this section, we delve into the most imaginative and most speculative governance types that exist within the realms of fantasy, science fiction, and speculative thought. These concepts push the boundaries of traditional political science, offering a playground of creative exploration. Number 1, geocracy. In a geocracy, leaders are chosen by the land itself or by elements of a prevalent nature magic system, implying a deep connection between the rulers and the natural or magical world. A speculative example might be a fantasy realm where Earth chooses the ruler through signs and omens, like special flowers blooming out of season, or wildlife showing fealty to the chosen one, like a white stag stepping out from the forest and letting the once and future king ride him. Interesting plot ideas here include a protagonist struggling with the recognition of the populace after being chosen by the land. Or a crisis occurs when the land seems to withdraw its support, leading to natural disasters and a quest to restore balance. Number 2, magocracy, or governance by mages, where magical ability is the primary criterion for leadership and political power. This is also a favorite of mine. I used this in my epic fantasy series, Sangwheel Chronicles, where all the nobles are mages, and you can check those books out in the same links below if epic fantasy is your jam. Interesting plots here is, of course, the intrigue between the mages, but also, what if the non-magical population grows restless? How do your mages react then? I've not only made a video about magocracies, but also made one about constitutional magocracies, which you can check out in the links in the description. Sorry, YouTube only lets me link 5 information cards per video. So yeah, you have a lot of plot potential in this form of government, if your magic system supports a magocracy. For number 3, I think I'm really going to surprise you. Let me know if you've ever heard of a kakistocracy. Any thoughts? Written them down in the comments? Right then. It's governance by the least qualified or most unscrupulous citizens. It is a system where the worst people are in power, often leading to corruption and inept governance. This is well suited to dystopian societies where positions of power are determined by one's ability to deceive, betray, and manipulate, leading to widespread corruption and social decay. You could play this for laughs in a satirical novel, or play it straight with the rise of a morally upright individual in a thoroughly corrupt kakistocracy. Or a group of citizens could band together to overthrow the kakistocrats. Any of those would be really interesting plot lines. Kakistocrats. Did not think that is a word I would ever say. And for our last example in this quick-fire fantasy governments, let's talk about a word I made up, a synthocracy. This refers to a system of governance managed by artificial intelligence or a non-human sentience, like potentially rulership by some kind of interplanar entity in fantasy. This kind of government emphasizes efficiency, data-driven decision-making, and potentially unbiased governance, at least unbiased by human standards. The Minds in Iain M. Banks's Culture series represents a form of synthocracy, with these hyper-intelligent AIs managing the societal welfare with vast intelligence and an ethical framework developed beyond human biases. There are some very interesting plot lines you can explore here. The transition of power from human to synthetic governance and the societal adaptations required. The ethical dilemmas that arise from AI decision-making processes. A conflict between different AI entities with divergent governance philosophies. Or the story of a human liaison navigating the interface between humanity and its synthetic governance. Iain M. Banks also explores what happens when such a government encounters other forms of government, and what is the ethical choice for those AIs then. And that's it. That's the end of the iceberg. What do you think? Which of these government types do you find most interesting? There is a whole host of politics in fantasy and sci-fi videos to come over the next few months. But if you want access to them right now, you can become a member of the channel by hitting the join button down below. For the price of a cup of coffee, you can get early access to all of my videos, along with other great perks, including your name in the credits, or even shoutouts like this one to Katie and Tony, members of the Build It in Stone tier of my channel. But please don't feel obligated to support the channel financially. You can also show your support just by watching another video. Since you enjoyed this one, maybe check out my video on building theocracies in fantasy, and I will see you soon for another episode of Just in Time Worlds, where we build what we need, when we need it.